For today's agenda, we're going to start with what is business transformation to make sure that we're all on the same page, and also answer the question of what does that mean exactly? If we want to be successful at the enterprise level, what are some of the key fundamental and best practices that needs to be in place? Next, I will also point out some of the technology trends that are hitting the market and what does that mean for us. Last but not least, if we have time, I will pull it all together with an example of a data science and analytic platform that is scalable, reliable, and sustainable to meet the enterprise need. What is business transformation? You've probably heard many times that it's become ubiquitous, regardless of the size of your company or the industry that you're in. It is about changing the way we do business by leveraging leading-edge technologies to meet customers' expectation. So in other words, it is about improving the user's experience. Now, according to the survey, 80% of the customers want good user's experience. What does that mean exactly? Many factors goes into user's experience, but I want to highlight the critical ones that are important to many companies' strategy. As I walk you through some of the key factors, you want to put yourself in the shoes of your customers regardless of whether they're an internal or an external customers. Picture yourself using the product. Ask yourself these questions. Why are you using it? What are the value you are getting for your time and money, especially if it is in exchange of your personal information? What makes this product better than someone else's? And just as importantly, how easy is it? How convenient is it? Rather than repeating the statistic from the slide, let me focus on some of the key messages. Connected experience is about being able to make a call into the company where they would not only have consistent messaging, but also know where you have left off in the transaction. How many times did you have to call into customer support? Not only did they have to pass you from department to department, but you have to repeat the same information with the same product that you're having trouble with time and time again. Through the power of AI, they should be able to identify who you are based upon the phone number or the device that you're calling from, as well as the product that you've already purchased. And if you have been searching on the website, predict what it is that you might be calling about. They should be able to handle the entire transaction from end to end in one phone call instead of passing you from department to department. This is an example of omnichannel support. The second bullet point is really about convenience. People want to have access to different devices and channels. I want to be able to access my texts and emails via my smartphone no matter where I'm at and at any given point in time. But regardless of major purchases, research, and activities that are done on my laptop, which is my personal preference, they should all be connected with the same information. For an example, I might start off with planning for a party on my laptop at home, but I should be able to finish the purchase on my smartphone while I'm waiting to pick up my daughter from school. Multi-channel support makes it easy for you to start on your laptop and complete it on your mobile apps. Personalization, what we want and need, changes all the time. What I need when I first graduated from college are new furniture, a car, auto insurance. It is very different when I got married. We bought a new house, we had to buy a lawnmower, power tools, homeowner insurance. And when the first baby came, we had to switch to a family insurance, buy baby furniture, car seats, cribs, clothes. And now with two teenagers, I will be very interested in knowing how I'm going to save for both college and retirement. I want personalized offer through my life journey. Data protection. I'm pretty sure that I don't need to tell you how important security and privacy are. We all have our concerns. As in previous years, people say that they expect the companies to be secured, and they want to keep, and you want them to keep your data safe. This really should not be a surprise for any company that wants to stay in business. So far, these three areas are what I would consider as the bare minimum requirements for any company to survive in the marketplace and grow. The differentiator is their ability to innovate. Before COVID, one of the biggest challenges are people who are resistant to changes. Although with millennials, one can argue that we have the opposite problem where they expect constant changes with multiple different options. Back in March, when we were hit with COVID, I remember talking to a senior officer who was worried about the impact of our digital transformation. Now, while it is true that we were lucky that we have already started on our journey of digital transformation before COVID, and we have already have some solution in place to provide users with better connected experience, some of our other solutions has nothing to do with making product or services more easily accessible. The good news is because our customers and business partners who were resistant to changes are now much more open to changes. Anything that can make their difficult life easier and make things more convenient is a great opportunity to help accelerate our business transformation to improve and to improve their life and also to give them the good users experience that they want. Now, due to COVID and the current social environment, 86% of the customers expect the company to take responsibility for the business outcome. This is relatively new. You may have read in the headline that Facebook and Twitter are now, are testifying before Congress on how they're going to police their content that we've just witnessed during the election. Now, if you take all of this in, what does that mean exactly for us technology folks? What are we supposed to do about it? So here are some of the key capabilities that you need to consider. When it comes to connected experience, in order to support omni-channel and multi-channel support, integration becomes very important. You need to be able to integrate your in-house system, your custom-built in-house system, with your third-party vendor tools. You need to be able to integrate the internal data with the external data, whether it is structured, semi-structured, or unstructured data. And with all of these connections and access and making sure that all these the system and data were able to connect and flow between each other, it is also very important to be able to orchestrate that. So in other words, let's suppose that a data come in that is of private nature, that has PII. Instead of storing it in a location that might cause compliance issue, you might want to reroute it. In other words, orchestrate it and put it somewhere else so that it can be managed and handled properly. So again, integration becomes very important for that connected experience. Personalization. In the past, the best thing that we can do with regards to personalization is through in-house structured data that already exists. We might have to go out and take surveys. We have to go in and do interviews. We have to go through all of these other traditional means. And one of the things that my friend have always constantly said is that customers' lives. Now, I know it sounds harsh, but I understand what he meant. When you would talk about customers' lives, like take for an example the survey, are you an organized person? I don't know how to answer that because before kids, I'm a very organized person. I'm almost, obsessive compulsive about being organized. But once I have kids and then my work's starting to pick up and all of that, I have to start prioritizing. I have to let go. And the first thing to go is the cleanliness of my house. So if anybody walk into my house, they would take one look at it. They might think that I am not a very organized person. So when you ask that question, am I an organized person? I don't know how to answer that. So does that make me a liar? No, it just makes me, you had to put things into context, right? And that is where the deep learning unstructured data comes in. Because of all of these different technologies, such as cloud, IoT, edge computing, 5G, there's CPU and GPU there too as well, that will enable AI so that it can use modeling for vision, photos, natural language process, speech, videos, all of that in order to help them understand who we are, what it is that we need, and when we need it, so that they can meet our need and give us that great customer's experience. Because I am, again, very appreciative out there if anybody can tell me how I can save for college and retirement at the same time. So with that, data protection. When it comes to data protection, we cannot be everywhere all at once. Leveraging technology to help us monitor, manage, and alert has always been and will continue to be important. The bad actors are getting more sophisticated, and so should we. These days, the report should not only be predictive in order to help us anticipate what it is that needs to be done, but also prescriptive. which regards to recommendations on what it is that should be done. Innovative solution. Now, as I've mentioned before, the game changer for each of these companies to distinguish themselves from everybody else is through innovations, providing unique services to give that great customer's experience. But as you're building up all of these solutions, especially in AI, how do you productize it to quickly bring it out to market? And how do you operationalize it so you can continue to maintain and support it, uh, to give it the quality that it needs in a more sustainable fashion? Right? And not only that, but optimizing the ability to optimize your insight and to do test and learn is a big game changer, because it allows you to go in and be able to figure out what it is that works, what it is that doesn't, and more importantly, what it is that we need to focus on in order to make it better. So the key question is, how do you productize and operationalize something that is new and has never been done before, especially in a constantly changing environment where the customers can, at best, change their mind because it implies that they know what they want, or at worst, don't know what they want and can't tell you what it is that they need to deliver. All of this on top of the technology that are quickly changing or be replaced with something else. The good news is that no matter what gets thrown at us, the key fundamental best practices remain the same. When it comes to building for the enterprise, whether it is infrastructure, applications, or AI, for good users experience, not only will the customer find value in the product, but it also needs to be simple and fast. If it is not easy and convenient with so many different choices out there, the customers can simply choose to move on. Your solution must be simple, fast, and value driven. For the next few slides, we'll talk about what are some of the approaches used to address the constant changes and uncertainties. Next, we'll touch a little bit upon the key technology capabilities that enables advanced analytics and AI. And then let's face it, it is really rare to find a one-stop shop or a solution that does everything that we need right off the shelf. We'll talk about bridging the gaps and building the solution to meet our needs while balancing current demands with future strategy plan. And last but not least, it is not just about the technology. It is also about the people and the processes that are impacted. When you're going through a digital transformation, you need to think about the people and the processes that will be impacted. And please pay special attention to unintended consequences. Business transformation, digital transformation, and innovation. They automatically put us in the category of entering new territories where the uncertainties are a given and certain failures are to be expected. Here are some key techniques to help you navigate through the unknowns as you try to figure out if you are on the right track. Make the necessary course correction with hopefully little to no major impacts, and to quickly take it out to market. You've probably already heard about Agile DevOps and microservices. So rather than spending the time to explain what it is, let's go through a simple business use case instead. Let's take a look at a day in the life of a data scientist and the model lifecycle. This is my workflow diagram of the AI model lifecycle. You may find others, but my illustration here hit all of the key components. Let's suppose, as a business use case, that you want to leverage computer visions and photos for the first time and figure out how badly damaged is the car. Is this a picture of John Doe? Now, if this is the first time your company have ever done this, you might want to start with a proof of concept. Why? Because you don't know what you don't know. Agile is designed to handle this type of scenario. So with each sprint, you'll be able to demonstrate to the stakeholders what it looks like to come into an agreement on whether to proceed or not, and what, if any, course correction is needed. The proof of concept goal is to really learn about what would happen if you were to ingest photos through the current process and pipeline, so you can figure out what works and what doesn't work. Let's not be aggressive here, because if you spend too much time trying to analyze things and trying to figure out what are all the business use cases, identify all the issues and risks before you even begin, you're going to end up with situations where you have analysis through paralysis. And that is the reasons why perfection is the enemy of progress is one of my favorite quote by Winston Churchill. The other issue too is that you might end up trying to, if you're too aggressive and trying to build everything all at once, is that you might end up being building out a monolith. Or what happened if you ended up in the wrong direction, right? And then you wasted all that time and technical debt. So the key thing here is try to go in and make small incremental changes. The proof of concept to prove out in small steps what works and what doesn't. So with that, let's go ahead and start off with the first component, which is the data ingestions and processing. So as we were stepping through the process and we were sending the photos in for the first time, what we discover is that our infrastructure can only handle low resolution images. Unfortunately, our models requires higher resolution images for training purposes. Can the infrastructure handle the size and volume caused by high resolution photos, especially when it's starting to come in fast and a huge amount of volumes and data? Now, as we move on to the next phase, the model training and building phase, we start to have to address the image labeling issues and whether we have enough data to train and build our models. So in the beginning, the assessment might consist of structured data gathered from forms filled out manually by a person or people with unstructured data, which is our photos. What does that model deployment look like now? Because we've never done it before. Are there any security or privacy concern that will prevent us from rolling it out into production? Now, an example of that is that we've asked customers to not send us credit cards and their driver's license, and instead they sent them anyway. So how do we want to handle that? Once it's out in production, are the models doing what they're supposed to do? Who or what is monitoring it? How are the incidents handled? And who needs to be alerted? What information needs to be provided to quickly resolve the problems? So these are the type of things that we discovered because in order to operationalize something, that also means that you need to be able to manage it, to manage the expectation. Is it doing what it's expected to do, and how do we handle it when it doesn't? That becomes logging. Logging becomes very important for audits to make sure that you comply with both the company and any federal rules and regulations. And what if you don't capture the model's transaction data? It will become very difficult to build a feedback loop to further optimize the model in the future. And last but not least, experimental designs, executions, test and learn, they're all very important game changer. By having the ability to test out your hypothesis in production in a control group setting, it would allow you to know what works, what doesn't, and where to focus for a better outcome. If you separate the business logic from the data translation piece, from the rest of the application operation, it will allow you to easily upgrade and migrate to different tools if needed. So that is some of the key things when we talk about reusable modules, right? So in the beginning, if you think about some of the things that we talked about, where each of these components, when we built it out into microservices, so that if you need to swap out one of those services because you find a better image labeling, or you find a better way of deploying something, or you find a vended tools that does better monitoring and managing, you can easily swap out only that component. And more importantly, especially when you swap out that component, if your business logic is separate from the rest of the component, you can now just migrate things and keep all of the algorithm that you use and built on your business logic intact, so you don't waste a lot of time trying to rebuild something that you already have and exists. They say that the only two sure things in life is death and taxes. I like to jokingly add a third. Technology is constantly changing. The key message that I want you to take away from this slide is that you need to be selective. Try not to reinvent the wheel or chase after the shiny objects without understanding what it is all about. It goes back to the fundamental question of what problem are you trying to solve? You need to go through a buy versus build assessment and build your business case. As you go through the assessment, here are some key factors. Interoperable integration. How hard is it to bring in that new technology and integrate it with existing systems or third-party partner solution? If you cannot do that, you might end up having to fill that gap with another set of tools, another set of products, or development work that can be very expensive. Agnostic and portable. We try to go with agnostic solution to make sure that it's portable. If technology change, we can swap it out. But if we have to go with proprietary solution, and in the case of a divorce, and we need to be separated for whatever reason, you need to think about an exit plan. Without an exit plan, and if it's not portable, you might be locked into a technology that can be very costly to maintain, as well as limiting in terms of technology capabilities. Duplication avoidance. If the problem can be solved with existing systems, please do so. You do not want to go in and support multiple tools that pretty much does the same thing. It adds up in terms of cost, maintenance, and support. So at the end of the day, what I'd like to say is that sometimes the right solution is a simple solution. And that's the reasons why my favorite quote at the bottom, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, is from the US Navy that I also like to make sure that you guys think about. Now with that, here's a list of major technology capabilities that have exploded in the past few years. I want to highlight some of the following. You already know about the GPU, what is widely used for model training and building. Google came out with their TPU, Tensor Processing Unit. They say that it is 15 to 30 times faster than the GPU in inferencing. NVIDIA, in answer to that, have their own Tensor unit. So now you have both solutions out there. So the reality of anyone, and not just giant companies with deep pockets, can have the processing power to quickly train and get the insights need in a short amount of time is now a reality. So an example of that is eBay. In order for a customer to perform a quick image search and find the perfect product in seconds, eBay was able to train a large-scale visual model to recognize hundreds of millions of product images over 10,000 categories within 4 days instead of 40 days using Google Cloud TPU. Now, I'll talk about the unstructured data later, but for now, let's continue on with the cloud. Companies are moving to the cloud. Some completely in the cloud, while others have hybrid solution. You should be asking, do you need multi-cloud support? Small companies, for an example, who don't have a lot of data might need to buy them from third-party vended tools that might be using a different cloud platform. Insurance companies who are traditionally in Amazon's shop, if they want to provide supplemental insurance to retail companies who views Amazon as their competitor, might now need to think about supporting Azure. So multi-cloud support becomes very important if you want to go in and have that interconnectability that we talked about in the beginning of this presentation for that great user's experience. And then last but not least, I cannot emphasize as much or how much of an area of opportunity we have in terms of dashboarding and reporting field. What we've done is providing more enriched data for the readers to digest and consume, but as mentioned earlier, we need to be better at leveraging machine learning to predict and prescribe what action needs to be taken with additional insight. As mentioned earlier, most likely you cannot reuse a vendor solution right out of the box. We will need to bridge that gap, or if it doesn't exist, we'll have to build it from scratch. Here are some fundamental capabilities and design element that you need to think about when you're building out your solution for the enterprise at the enterprise level. I'm not going to go into and explain what is scalable and flexible and maintainable and sustainable. Instead, I'm going to talk about what are the different approaches that you need to take in order to make it scalable and flexible and maintainable and sustainable. Moving from monolith to modular, breaking it out into smaller components so that we can reuse it multiple times. And if you ever have to go in and maintain it, just change it in one place, it suddenly go in and roll it out to all of the other places that uses it too as well. And it's not just apply only to development and programming, it also applies to Model 2 as well. Because instead of having a monolithic model, you can also have modular models so that you can graph them together. So you have like a smaller model could be, is this a person? Is this a man? Does he have a mustache? All of those design elements to identify this is John Doe can now, some of them can be reused to identify if this is Mary Jane, or or is this a man of a certain age, right? You want a list of all the men that are of a certain age. You can reuse that. So modularizing things will help with flexibility and maintainability. Um, if you automate, that helps a lot with respect to being scalable and being maintainable. And I don't need to explain to you the importance of automation. The one key thing is that I will caution about trying to automate too soon. You probably do not hear a lot about that, but the reasons why I say that is that if you have never done anything like this before, you're trying something new, you don't want to spend a lot of time automating something immediately right off the bat. So that by at the end of the day, you'll discover, oh, wait a minute, this is the wrong process, this is the wrong direction. You've done all that work of automation, you have to start all over again, right? So you want to balance it out with the proof of concept where you have gotten far enough where you felt really comfortable about it. This is looking really good. You were able to streamline. You got all these signed off and everything. Then you automate. All right. So there's a fine balance between when do you need to do that. IT support and self-service. You want to empower the users. You want to give them great users experience. And one of the things that always a killer, of course, is that if you don't have self-service or if it's done poorly, you always have to end up crying for help, or you ended up getting puzzled or it's getting frustrated at all. So you need to make sure that you built it in a great self-service with amazing users interface that is easy and simple for them to use, that is fast, that will allow them to empower themselves, have great users experience, and minimize the amount of time they have to contact IT support, who can then spend their time on more important things like building out new innovative solutions. So it's a win-win for everybody with that self-service support. So we're moving from IT support to self-service support. And once you have that, then you also need to think about like, look at repeatable pattern. Instead of building it for that one-time solution, instead of having that hard-coded solution, can you design it in a way that if you can imagine abstracting that layer out, so all you have to do is plug in that solution, the differences, like here's the data or here's the different parameters, that automatically being able to be configurable, it will take that solution and be reused multiple times in multiple different use cases. Okay. So now that I've talked about here are the different approaches that we've used in order to build our data science and analytic platform, what are some of the key features that we have built? In the beginning, we started out with batch. We moved to real time. So we now have real time messaging, scoring, monitoring. We are currently centralized in terms of our data location, in terms of our model building training. However, as the edge computing becoming more and more important and demand starting to increase, we might want to think about federated learning. We'll talk a little bit more about federated learning if we have time. Uh, Descriptive and prescriptive. Again, I cannot repeat enough how much we really need to work in this area. It is, to me, amazing how, as we are starting to get more unstructured data and our data is getting more enriched and our information, the report that we're providing out there is much, much better than it was before. But to be honest, it's still pretty descriptive, right? If we can somehow use the machine learning, not just for our customers, but let's shine the spotlight on us and use machine learning to understand better of how we're using our systems and how we're utilizing it and everything so that we can be much more prescriptive in terms of like anticipate what's going to happen, and here are the recommendation of how we're going to fix it. What are all the actionable items that coming out of this report that's being recommended out of this report? That is the direction that we should be moving toward. And then last but not least, testing and experimentation. Mentioned earlier about testing, experimenting in production so that we can go in and quickly understand what works and what doesn't and how and where to focus in order to optimize for that best outcome. And we're adding more to the in terms of what all the different types of testing, A/B testing, AA testing, multi-arm bandit, all sorts of different types of testing that goes into the testing experimentation. When you are working on a digital transformation at the enterprise level, we need to recognize the fact that it is not just about the technology or our external customers. We need to consider the impact to the people and the process within the company too as well. With the constant changes in both the business and technologies along with the competing priorities, how do you balance between the current demands and keeping the lights on with the future strategic initiatives? That is where the agile approach comes into play. It needs to be customer-led features. When we talk about business value driven prioritization, sorry, that is really a mouthful. Business value driven prioritization, the question that you need to ask are, what is the business value? Who does it impact? And what are the impacts? That will allow you to be able to prioritize the work and recognize the ROIs a lot faster. The other key component of this are model and data governance. Compliance and intellectual property are very important. But keep in mind that just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because we can roll out a model onto a customer phone, should we? Even if the likelihood of the model being stolen or backward engineered is very small, is it worth the business risk of losing the IP? Maybe the impact would be huge. It is really not a technical decision because we know that we can do it. It is possible, but it is a business decision. That is where model governance with business oversight play a major role in making that business decision. If we can build, and on top of that, if we can build model governance and some of the policies and rules and guidelines onto our support, for an example, being able to have versioning control automatically where the users don't have to think about it would be a game changer because they don't have to, they can focus only on model building and training their models, but they don't have to worry about all of the operational tasks because that is done automatically for them. So it's a win-win for everyone. The bottom half of it talks about the analytic culture. How do you go in and educate everyone to understand what are the new technology and what does it mean exactly and how does it help them? Training is going to become very important. So if you can have a training program where you can have people from different areas and experiences at different levels, that kind of help promote different ways of thinking. And hopefully that will also promote thinking outside the box where if you have this new technology, I can now go in and use photos that can provide me with the decisions a lot faster and more accurate. What does that mean exactly? How does that change the way I work, right? And that'll also promote a lot of creativity, come up with new ideas. And more importantly, I also like to talk about users group. We talk about training, which is the usual traditional method, but users group also is very important too as well, because if you think about it, a lot of times the help that you need, we would love to share to others. We wanted to have that type of community. By having a users group where everybody can meet and share, here are some of the problems that I'm trying to solve, here are my solutions, and being allowed to ask those questions in a more informal, fun way that will also do a lot in terms of creativities, in terms of helping people think differently, as well as also helping each other creating new solutions. It also goes a lot further along when it comes to better adoptions and more importantly, meaningful work, right? This all contribute to analytic culture because instead of using the old traditional way where we kind of guess and we took a swab at it and all of that, a swag at it, we instead are using analytic to make these type of decisions. When it comes to personalization, the two key elements that have to exist is deep learning models and unstructured data. You need the unstructured data from in terms of photos and medias and voice and drones and all of that from all the multiple different sources in combination with the models in order to process it and score so that we can figure out who you are, problems that you're trying to solve, and how do we go in and make your life better. All of this is very important because all of the senses to put it into context, what it is that you're looking for, where are you in your life journey? And you see this plays out in the telematics and autonomous driving in the smart city, in the smart home, in the smart mobility. And you also see it in telematics when we have COVID and you can't not leave home, but now we can be able to at least talk to your doctor and figure out and through telematics what's going on, and they can prescribe things for you, and then you can have it actually sent over to your house. So all of these things are all geared toward making our life easier, trying to by understanding who we are, what we need, and when we need it, and why we need it. What we are experiencing right now is a convergence of the technologies. We already know the advantage of big data that is critical to giving us the vast amount of data needed for the machine learning, the rich data sources that is needed coming from the many different devices, sensors, and location, the processing power of the GPU in order to train and build the model. We've already talked about the TPU that will allow you to go in and do it even faster with a larger set of data set. This is all help with making AI a reality. 4 years ago, when I created this slide, it was more focused on trying to convince everyone why AI is real and is not at all a hype. Now I'm reusing that same slide to then talk about with the introduction of 5G, where we can now reduce the response time that is needed. It does make sense that we can now bring AI to the edge along with federated learning. So what is federated learning? It is the ability to train the models using dataset at the local node, such as your cell phone, the sensors, medical labs, where sharing data is difficult because of the unreliable network or privacy concern. An example of this is that NVIDIA and Mass General Brigham Hospital use federated learning to predict COVID-19 patient of their oxygen needs using data using 20 days worth of data across 20 different hospitals. With digital transformation and innovation, the question becomes, how do you productize the AI and analytics solution for speed to market at scale? How do you operationalize it so that you can monitor and manage it for the enterprise? We did that by building a data science and analytic platform. Let's go ahead and take a look at at the model lifecycle. In the first two components, there are a lot of vendor solutions that are already out there. If you can recall, one of the pillars is to not go in and reinvent the wheels. So we are actually using vendor solutions for these two components. However, there is still a lot of work for us to do. For an example, the data engineering are working out data lineage, data retention, authentication, authorization to be in compliance with the CCPA. They were doing that last year. So keep in mind that just because we can technically give you access to the data, it doesn't mean that we should, at least not with the new law in place. Now, as with the data ingestions and processing, there's a lot of vendor solution for the model building and training too as well. One of the things that I want to note is that I noticed that because it is difficult to find data scientists, I start to see companies that are providing solutions that's making it a lot easier for the data scientists, not just for the data scientists, but also for the citizen data scientists, or in other words, the data and the business analysts to build and train the models. So you don't have to have the deep skills that is required by the data scientists in order to use these tools to make it a lot easier for everybody else to build and train models. Moving down the line in deployment, we have actually built a model deployment solution about 7 or 8 years ago because there was nothing like that out in the market. It was designed so that the data scientists can choose from a repository of over 40 different types of model workflow. All they have to do is call a RESTful API, indicate what model they want to use, plug in the data, and get a score. That used to take about 6 months to something that can be done in only a couple of hours. Currently, many vendor solutions are taking over this area. If and when that time comes, because our components are actually applications or services integrated into a single platform, we can just as easily replace our custom built solution with that of a vendor solution, or at least more easily be able to migrate out of it and use a vendor solution. Now for the next three cycle, or what I would call the last mile, and it is very critical in terms of turning all those beautiful value-driven models into reality from an enterprise level point of view. Models gets degraded over time as soon as you roll it out to production.
If you are lucky and something happened, it will cause the system to go down because you will immediately know that something bad has happened and you will go in and check it out and fix it. If you're unlucky, because the changes are so subtle that you would not even notice that it happened, and you're making all these business decisions based upon bad information, and it might cause revenue issues, it might cause all sorts of compliance issues, or it might even cause life-threatening situation. So we want to be able to build a tool that uses the statistical formula to monitor the historical trend and send alerts when it falls out of range. Remember how I said earlier about how we should make it configurable so that it's not just for one use case, but it can serve multiple as much as possible? So in this instance, the original intent was to go in and monitor models. However, because of the way we designed it, we can actually monitor the data against for subtle changes too as well. So that is the power of configurations and being able to reuse the same types of design. The next step is like logging. Now, logging is important for audits and compliance, as well as trying to gather insights. So the focus that we were trying to place onto this application for now is trying to expand our dashboard features to be more self-service and automated so that we can eventually get to our ultimate goal, which is providing prescriptive reporting. The next step is the experimental design and execution with test and learn. Being able to test a hypothesis in production so that we can quickly figure out where to focus and provide the maximum value that is quantifiable. So in other words, it's not a guess. We can show the numbers and prove whether it's working and how well. Like the monitoring application, our test and learn product can be reused for experiment that has nothing to do with models. One of the example, our first use case, as a matter of fact, in using this product out in production is banner placement on the cell phone. Trying to figure out what would capture the user's interest the most. So this is our entire product. Some of the components can be used separately or together as one integrated platform. As we continue to streamline and automate, we're adding self-service capabilities so that the data scientists can go in and load the model, set up the model monitoring themselves. The business system can pull the analytic insight for the value-driven decision, and then in the end there, we can capture the data and the insight for future analysis and optimizations and using experimental designs and execution to better optimize the models to have that most effective value gain. So with that, what we have now achieved by following the 4 pillars, trying to be able to have a scalable solution that is reliable, sustainable, and flexible, and more importantly, speed to market that will meet the customer's expectation. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope that the things that I provided to you are of value. I know that we can go into a lot more details with a lot more use cases, but given the time and amount that is in, I hope that this will give you an idea of what are some of the amazing things that could be done. Please feel free to contact me through LinkedIn. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again.